Good morning. On behalf of the Institute on Immigrant Integration, Research and Policy, we'd like to welcome you all to our webinar on creating inclusive workplaces. Today, we will examine why organizations need diversity and inclusion practices and protocols. Our webinar will underscore that we need diversity policies to ensure that we are selecting employees based on merit and not based on preconceived assumptions, on stereotypes, or preconceived ideas about capabilities and competencies. And diversity and inclusion policies and practices are really important and critical to ensure that we're not contributing to brain waste and loss of potential talents. But diversity without inclusion can lead to conflicts, and that's why we need efforts that facilitate inclusion. Research documented the benefits of diversity. When we have a diverse team, and when we have a diverse workforce in general, we have different perspectives and different ways of thinking. And there's a strong correlation between having diverse teams and team effectiveness, innovations, deeper analytical power, creativity, and productivity. Researchers have proven that when people feel included as members of an organization, they have work motivation and are more productive. When people feel valued, when they feel professionally empowered and socially accepted, they have a high level of loyalty and a sense of ownership of the organization, and they tend to give their all to that organization. The opposite is also true. That's why there is a need to have both diversity and inclusion policies in an organization. The business case for these practices and policies can never be overstated. And today we have experts who will help us make sense of what it means to have an inclusive workplace for foreign-born New Yorkers and foreign-born employees in general. A workplace that sees their value beyond the surface. What is that workforce? What does that workforce look like? What models exist to nurture and cultivate that workforce? We will discuss how employers can advance these practices and actively and proactively and effectively integrate foreign-born employees in the workplace. It is my pleasure now to turn it over to our exceptional fellows on immigrant integration, David Munda and JT Lim, who will moderate the discussion today. David and JT, take it away.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Refke, for that wonderful introduction. Everybody, welcome today. My initial comments here will be to welcome each speaker by name and official title, and then I will introduce our keynote speaker, Stephanie Alman, after reading her short bio. And today we are honored and privileged to have Dr. Stephanie Alman, and we also have, Dr. Stephanie Alman has specialized in questions of AI and their implications around the new American workplace. We also have Mohamed Tiam, who's originally from Senegal in West Africa. And he's a New York resident of the city of Syracuse. And in addition to Mohamed Tiam and Stephanie Alman, we also are privileged to have Kevin Borden. And Kevin has a long and distinguished history of organizing around issues of social and economic justice. Again, I'd really, I'm really glad to our panelists for being here today. I'll be co-moderating this session with JT. I will begin by introducing our keynote speaker, who is Stephanie Alman. And Stephanie will be providing her special remarks after I conclude with her introduction. Um, and Stephanie is the National Director of Career Services at Upwardly Global, UG, where she oversees programs that support refugee and immigrant professionals as they enter the US workforce. Throughout her distinguished career, she has developed initiatives focused on economic inclusion, to build a more resilient, sustainable, and equitable future, working across the nonprofit, government, and corporate sectors to realize this mission. So I take this opportunity now to welcome special remarks by Stephanie Alman on Upwardly Global's report on documenting how AI tools have negative implications for new Americans in the workplace. Stephanie, the floor is yours.
Thank you. And it's such a pleasure to be here. I'm excited to share about what we do at Upwardly Global and also share not just the negative implications to AI, but the opportunities that there are in technology as well. So we'll take a look at all angles of this as I present today. I'll start with an overview of Upwardly Global and our work. We are built on opportunity. In the US, nearly 2.3 million college-educated new Americans are facing under or unemployment. There's also millions of job openings. And so here is where we see this opportunity to connect folks who are qualified for these jobs and these open positions that employers are working so desperately to hire for. In addition to that, college-educated immigrants have missed out on more than $39 billion in wages while they were working in lower-level positions, lower than what they are qualified to be working within. So here we can look at this as a problem. We can also see this as an opportunity. And at Upwardly Global, we work to take this and move this into action. As we look at the individuals that come through our physical or virtual doors, we see that there are a series of barriers that many of them face. We are working with folks who are new to the US and they are first navigating their job search here in the US. They come to us with a wealth of professional experience and should be qualified for high-level positions, or at least positions that are matching their experience and their skill set. But when they come to us, they have often gone through the job search and not found success. There was someone who told me recently she had applied to over 3,000 jobs and had not gotten an interview. So we have to ask ourselves why that is, because this is someone that was highly qualified in the human resources profession, and did end up finding a great job at the level that her experience really allowed for. But the barriers that she was coming in with include many of what I have here on this screen. I think it's important for us to look at these barriers because it's also an opportunity for all of us to reflect on how we maybe are part of some of these barriers and continuing the pattern of some of these barriers, but also where we can be part of supporting folks in ensuring that we're a part of a solution. So career navigation as a first one is an important part of our program offering. I'll speak more about that in just a moment, but knowing really where to go on a pathway, given the past experience that someone has come with from their home countries. Resumes in the US style, skill, license, and certification gaps, lack of professional networks. I want to just really highlight that one because we know that over 80% of jobs that people get in the US are because of people that they know. So to come and to not know other people in your professional space is a real disadvantage. English proficiency and confidence in speaking in English in the professional setting, employer bias, unspoken cultural norms, and then the prioritization that comes with the immigrant experience, often working within survival jobs or managing competing responsibilities and priorities. We have two main methods of the way that we offer our programs. One is direct to job seekers that come to us, and the other is by equipping workforce partners with our resources and tools so that they can support immigrants and refugees that are in their communities. By the end of our program, we aim to ensure that the job seekers that come to us, the immigrant and refugee job seekers with professional backgrounds, they come to us and they leave prepared and confident to successfully navigate the job search in the US. We don't give them jobs. We do open up doors to an employer network, but more than that is we equip them to be able to independently find success in their job search, to take the tools that they've learned and be able to navigate the very specific cultural norms that are part of the expectations here in the US. It is always a surprise to me every day. I learn of something that may be rather innate for me and something I am not thinking about, but is actually something that's very specific to the way that the US job market functions and the job search methods function as well. We offer career planning, licensing and certification, resume, cover letter, and interview preparation, job search strategies, professional network access, including employer network access, and industry-specific guidance, because we know at the professional level, career pathways can be highly complex. So we have career coaches that work with us at Upwardly Global that are specifically trained in different industry areas to allow for that expertise in that complexity and navigating it. Our impact to date, we've been here for 25 years, but we have seen over 11,000 people placed into thriving wage jobs. We see a significant annual salary increase. And as we calculate what that economic impact is of those who have been placed over the years, we see an immense amount of annual economic impact, and really see this as part of the story of how inclusion in this way is a part of the bettering of our communities and our economies. I want to speak specifically to technology, and specifically within technology, artificial intelligence. AI is buzzy right now. Everyone's talking about it. It's everywhere. I'm using it in my day-to-day. I'm sure many of you are as well. And I think it's important for us to really take a look at it and understand it from all of the different angles and avenues, especially for those of us who are working in workforce development and are working to ensure that the work that we do is increasingly inclusive. So I'll start with some of the risks that we see with artificial intelligence. And at the end of this presentation, I will link to a report that we put out last year with much of what I'm discussing here as well. So the communities we partner with, in the case of Upwardly Global, immigrants and refugees, these are considered edge cases by those that are developing artificial intelligence products. So the norm in this case, and in the way that many of these technology companies are looking at their audience base, is really at that top of the bell curve. So if we're thinking about who's at the top of the bell curve, what are the majority of people, and what is the majority of information that exists that AI is pulling from? So the way AI works is it's as good as the data that goes into it, but it also really works to try to find that mid-range set of information. So what is that information that's most frequently discussed or most frequently there? It's really kind of almost taking an average of, and then spitting out that average of the data inputs. So if we look at a bell curve and we think about it that way, there are so many niche groups and niche needs amongst anyone in any city, any country, any state. As we look at the specific needs of immigrants and refugees, Upwardly Global is here because we recognize those specific needs and the specific ways that the cultural norms of the US job search need to be trained, taught, and shared to people who are new to the US. That's not something that AI in large scale is working to do. So people outside of that top of the bell curve are considered edge cases, and that's not who tech companies are designing for. So mainstream products and services do not accommodate for edge case communities. In addition, the products may lack, because of that, the cultural competence. They may fail to adequately recognize, skills, as we're talking about workforce development specifically and thinking about a job seeker's background, fail to adequately recognize their skills. Tools that are working to support recruiters and employers may demonstrate bias in hiring and are often very expensive as well. And so these are some of the challenges that we've run into as we have looked at and studied solutions. We piloted an AI AI-backed career navigation tool. And it was a huge flop, but it was also a huge opportunity for us to be learning, and part of what really was the impetus of this report for us to share so that others can be learning what to be looking for and how we can be making decisions and how we use artificial intelligence in a way that best serves the communities that we're working within. So of the resumes that we put into this career navigation tool, with the objective of hearing from this tool which pathways these individuals should go into now that they're here in the US, 35% of education credentials were misidentified. And 20% of work experience credentials were also misidentified. That's a pretty significant number. That's if we're going to have a group of thousands of job seekers that are putting in their resume, that's a lot of customer service emails that we're going to get in response saying, why is it telling me to be a petroleum engineer when I was a teacher? And so we were seeing things as drastic and as far off as that. And a lot of that just comes from not being able to really, again, translate that past experience and that education that's international. Those, again, are part of the edge case groups, which these tools are not often designed for. Here are examples. I'm not going to read them all to you. They're in our report, but something that I'll call out, if you want to read through while this is on the screen, please do. What I'll call out is that many folks who come here new to the US and navigate the US job search are coming with really interesting kinds of backgrounds that are not as common to someone who is maybe born here in the US. For example, in Afghanistan, something that I was seeing as we were working with a large group of Afghans in the recent years is that many of them come with what almost appears as multiple career lifetimes. There's someone at top of mind for me who actually works with us now at Upwardly Global. This was someone who was a physician, also a statistician, and also was leading World Bank programs and UN programs. So, in that kind of international development space. So thinking about someone who has all of those backgrounds, how could an AI tool really know how to navigate the nuance of that to point someone in the right direction? And we were seeing things like pie in the sky, maybe that person should be a petroleum engineer. And of course, that is a really far off example. I use it because it's also a little bit humorous, but it just really shows that there was mismatch here. And that nuance of that individual's experience was not represented in what the outputs were from the AI tool. Something else that we piloted, and I'll flip this as a positive pilot, huge win, was an employer recruitment AI tool. So HiredScore is a partner of ours, and they integrate with Workday. They are actually now a part of Workday, but they integrate with the ATS systems that recruiters use when they are working to hire staff. And what's great about that is we are now talking about a tool that fits into existing operations. So it's not a second step. It's not somewhere else, a different platform. It is within the platform that they are using every day. And what HiredScore does is it works with a number of nonprofit organizations with job seekers that are similar and of course very different, but in to the job seekers of Upwardly Global, but similar in the fact that they maybe are often overlooked by recruiters and by ATS tools because of the way that these applicant tracking systems tend to perpetuate biases that they're human-made tools these are biases that are in our systems. So HiredScore is working with often overlooked populations and surfaces them for jobs that they see are a good fit within these systems that recruiters are using. And so there's two ways that this works. There's fetch, and then there's reverse fetch. And fetch in the tech term is about pulling information. So this is where an example here of what the screen looks like for Upwardly Global talent being surfaced automatically when they qualify for open positions that a recruiter is hiring for. So this is what a recruiter's page may look like. And you can see that there's applicants, but then there's also this tab called leads. And the leads are the ones that are being surfaced by HiredScore from, again, these often overlooked populations, or as they say in the tech space, the edge cases. The reverse fetch does the opposite. So this is an opportunity for recruiters to then go into the pool of resumes from Upwardly Global talent and from other organizations to see who are those people that are, interesting and surfacing in very specific needs that the employers have. And so it works in both ways. This has been a huge success because Upwardly Global is surfacing talent at a much higher rate than what the standard applicant pool actually looks like. So we're seeing that they're being surfaced and matched for open roles at a very high rate. This is what we would call ethical AI. It is ethical AI-powered job matching, and it's streamlining processes for recruiters. So it's actually also making their work easier and their lives easier. It's successfully mitigating bias. So this is a skills-based drive as opposed to a pedigree-based drive. We know that ATS systems often use what the preference of the recruiters are, and those recruiters may have bias towards certain pedigree and otherwise. This, again, mitigates that. And it could also solve for this lack of professional networks. So as I mentioned earlier, a huge barrier for people new to the US is the lack of professional network. This is now surfacing folks for recruiters directly. It is almost that flag or a tap on a shoulder to a recruiter that someone may not otherwise have the opportunity to get when they don't have that professional network and that person to go to. So in all of our learnings from both the flop and the success, the first one that I'll share is that we need to be user-centric in the way that we're looking at technology and the way that we're building our programs and tying them into technology. So we have to start with the problem. AI is shiny right now. I've seen it even within the organization that I'm working now to say, how can we use AI? Where can we plug in AI? But we actually have to flip the question to say, how do we solve this problem? This is the problem that we're experiencing, because the truth is that AI might not be the solution, but maybe it is. And then understanding what those options are to then plug into that problem. But starting always with the problem will help us in being increasingly user-centric and client-centric, that's a little bit more tech language to say user. We don't want to invest in AI for AI's sake. We want to take the time to understand what different AI technologies are capable of and invest where there is the most value. And again, where it really solves the problem that we are setting out to solve for. We want to use the organization's expertise when raising questions about potential tools as well. So it is really very easy to be swayed by a salesperson in tech. They've got shiny objects for us that can be pitched to really solve so much. But we need to know how to ask questions in ways that, again, best serve our clients and best support our needs. So instead of asking, does your tool do this? Asking more of, how does your tool help in solving this problem that I have? So again, it's really flipping this so that we are now in the driver's seat. We're the ones that are smart here because what we're smart on is the problems. And we're not just falling for solutions that are out there. We also want to approach technology investments as partnerships as best we can. So we want to be co-designing, and that is really underlining so much of what I have been speaking to so far around the fact that the communities that we're working with, there's so much opportunity here in making sure that we are meeting our labor needs in our communities with this incredible group of talent. Yet at the same time, it feels like such a mismatch to also say that group of people may also be treated as an edge case in, again, the tech lingo. And so we want to flip that. We want to say, how can we help you all as a product and tech team to design for this incredible opportunity for both impact on individuals, but also our workforce. And when we co-design, we're helping them to learn and we are teaching them as well. We have had great opportunity to do this with Upwardly Global and our incredible job seeker pool. I think that it has really been eye-opening for many tech companies to work with us, to see and to learn from us, to understand that these edge cases should really be taken into consideration closer to the center of the bell curve, because every one of the folks that we are working with is a real potential for a great job here in the US and brings such incredible experience and education. And we don't want those individuals to any further be overlooked by employers, by recruiters, but also by these tech tools. So co-designing is a great solution and a way to make sure that the people that we are working with are at the center of what's being designed. And then I'll just add a few other notes that are outside of our report, but just from my own perspective. Again, underlining, we need to figure out what problem we're solving for as the first step, not chasing technology. We don't want to be on the back foot. We do want to be innovative, and we do want to be using technology. It is helping us to be more efficient. It is helping us to optimize our operations. It's helping people get access to information in new and incredible ways. We always want to start with the problem. So finding that balance between being excited for what's out there and also making sure that what we are pulling towards us is really meeting our needs. Another note to add is that the quality of the data drives the accuracy of the results. So it's the information that goes in that informs the information that comes out. If we see that tools are not using data that is inclusive of the people that we are working with, then it will not have outputs that are inclusive of the people we are working with. So that's just something to note and to think about as we're shopping for products and as we're looking at technology as solutions. And then lastly, and I think I keep saying everything's important, but I feel this is incredibly important, is we really have to be realistic about AI limitations. AI is not as smart as human. I know that there's a lot of discussion out there around, the AI takeover and the robots that will be smarter than us. And maybe one day that will be true, but that is not today. We are smarter than AI. And when we don't act as though we are smarter than AI, then we let AI give us information that we may fall for, trust, or believe that's inaccurate. So we need to see AI as a partner and as a tool and be really realistic about what those limitations are. It's a real risk to fall for the fact that the AI could be smarter than us. A way to get around this is to be thinking about, how do we prompt AI to give us information to help us, human beings, make good decisions? What information can I extract, and how do I prompt that information so that I, again, as a human, can take into account all the nuance that I know that there is, and use the critical thinking that only I, a human brain, can implement to then make the right decisions. So instead of going to the career navigator and saying, here's my resume, what should I be now that I'm here in the US? What should my path be? It's instead prompting a series of questions to understand what the options are, what the considerations may be, and then really be smart in making decisions from the human perspective. So we want to see AI, again, as a tool, always accompanied by human, and always really kind of checked by human as well. And so AI is incredibly powerful, but we remain to be even more so. And this can help us. AI can be a great tool to help us to be smarter, and to make better decisions and to have more information. And we just have to find that right balance in how we work with it. For more on what I've just shared, you can read our AI for Impact report. It highlights both the positives and the negatives of technology as it's emerging today. But I think most importantly, outlines what it is to be looking for, what questions to be asking, and how to navigate the use of technology in a way that can best serve our organizations and best serve our intentions in workforce development as well. So you can use this QR code with your phone if you want to just point it to the screen. You can also take this link as well, and I can put it into the chat once I'm done sharing screen. And that is all I have for you. So thank you so much. I know that I'll be answering a few more questions in a bit, but appreciate this time to walk through these details.
Right, thank you so much for that, Stephanie. So I'll hand it over to my co-moderator, JT, who will take over for the next section. Thank you.
Thank you, David, and thank you, Ms. Alman, for your wonderful presentation. It was really helpful to learn about the wonderful job that you're doing at Upward Global. And I think your insights were especially meaningful given how timely the issue of AI is in the current day and age. Okay, so let me reintroduce our remaining panelists. Now we'd like to hear from Mr. Tiam and Mr. Borden. So as introduced by David earlier, Mr. Mohamed Tiam is originally from Senegal and is currently a New York resident in the city of Syracuse. Syracuse University, Syracuse University with a Master of Arts in Pan-African Studies. Mr. Tiem is also a dedicated and passionate CNY community advocate and organizer, and a former ONA job coach at Interfaith Works of Central New York. In these roles, he has actively worked to revitalize workforce development in the state of New York. And moving on to Mr. Borden, who has a long and distinguished history of organizing around issues of social and economic justice. In October 2023, Mr. Borden founded the nonprofit consulting firm Silo Ventures, specializing in assisting organizations in running effective issues campaigns. And while at Silo Ventures, Mr. Borden has also been helping lead the Ellis Island Initiative, a statewide coalition of New York's leading labor, business, faith, and advocacy organizations aimed at transforming the state's approach to integrating migrant families into communities. So first, we'll give the floor to Mr. Tiem. Mr. Tiem, please take it away. Each panelist will have approximately 5 to 10 minutes to remark on their work experience, and especially on the issue of what works when building inclusive workplace cultures for foreign-born workers. So, Mr. Tiem.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. I just want to start by saying thank you to Stephanie for a wonderful presentation. I used to work for Upwardly Global, and we used to partner with them. And we understand the incredible work that they are doing in helping immigrants and refugees to be able to acclimate to the U.S. workforce. And I also want to take my time to thank other panelists and thank David and Refki and Kevin as well for this wonderful opportunity. And I feel like this is a discussion that we need to have right now, and specifically given what is happening right now in the U.S. And in most cases, immigrants and new Americans' values and the skills they are bringing in within the U.S. workforce has been dismissed for a long time. And I think today, the conversation should be more about how we can be able to have these open dialogues, a dialogue that are going to be centered not only for immigrants and refugees, but as a community as well. And at the same time, pinpoint about policies and the role of local leaders to be able to help us move forward. Just to talk about my experience a little bit, I came to Syracuse as a student, was given a scholarship to do my master's in Syracuse University. And after I graduated, I used to work as a research assistant and teaching assistant. And later on, decided that I wanted to have more impact in my community in Syracuse. I decided to work for Interfaith Work. So Interfaith Work has been known as one of the main resettlement agencies in Central New York. And we used to do a lot of work in helping immigrants and refugees acclimate in the US. And being able to work in that program, the Professional Pathway Program, which is a program that is sponsored by the New York State Office for New Americans, I witnessed the power of hope and the quiet dignity of working people in the face of struggle. And I feel like, as we all know, immigrants and refugees and new Americans as well, when they come to the US, they embrace this nation creed as well, because they know the values of hard work. So they are trying to bounce back from adversity to reinvent their lives. And I feel like sometimes all they need is to have a proper representation in the hiring process. And as you all know, pretty much here in the United States, being able to find a job, especially as a foreign-born, can be very daunting because there's so many stereotypes, cultural barriers, and all these kind of things that employers put on the front door, so people cannot be able to get into their field. So something that I always focus on is that immigrants and new Americans, they have skills, they have values, and sometimes we have to collaborate with hiring managers to see how they can be culturally responsive and linguistically accessible when it comes to their hiring process. Or at the same time, when they are also trying to hire someone, how we can be able to facilitate the onboarding process, making sure, for example, they can just give a brief introduction of the company as a whole, and at the same time, what kind of process of inclusion that they are trying to put into place. Because people are always striving in the workplace, depending on how people are treated, how employees are treated, depending how employees are also valued as well too. And I feel like sometimes we have to just walk away from this kind of hierarchy in terms of hiring people or resorting to pedigree hiring in a case that I have to hire someone because we share more in common as opposed to somebody who come from outside the United States. So I can just like put it there for now, and as you move toward the question, I'm ready to respond to any question that you have as well too.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Tim. We'll move directly to Mr. Borden. Mr.
Great.
Borden?
Yeah, thanks. It's really wonderful to be with everyone today, and would like to thank Guillermo and the Rockefeller Institute for the invite to participate in today's conversation. And Stephanie, it was really lovely to hear your presentation. And Mohammed, I'm a huge fan of interfaith work, so it's great to know that you have some history with them. So in terms of a personal introduction, again, my name is Kevin Borden. I was born and raised north of Buffalo, New York, and currently reside in New Paltz with my partner Teresa and our two sons, Finn and Mac. I was given the opportunity to start organizing in 1995 in Montana, of all places, and with Montana People's Action, and we did a lot of housing affordability organizing, and then moved over to Idaho and helped to create an organization called Idaho Community Action Network, where it was this unique organization where we had like a food discount buyers program and also did issue-based organizing with low-income Idahoans and farm workers around healthcare access and wage issues. And from there, I moved back east and started working on the national level at the Center for Community Change, now known as Community Change, during the early days of the fair immigration reform movement, the creation of that, of FIRM, it's what it's known today as, and really worked on a lot of like economic security programs to make sure that, like programs like SNAP, for instance, were still able to be accessed by immigrant families. And then last but not least, for the last 13 years, founded an organization called MH Action, which we built multiracial, primarily women-led leadership teams in trailer parks all across the country that had been and continue to face predatory equity scheme buy-up of their communities that's really strangling those folks for profit. The reason why I went into a little bit of my like personal organizing history, a lot of it is really based in rural, exurban communities and a lot of communities that are, have historically been predominantly white. And so when I started Silo Ventures, was approached by the Ellis Island Initiative, which was the brainchild of two incredibly talented folks that I know many know on this call, Steve Choi and Ravika Rajkishan. So the concept around the Ellis Island Initiative was really a response to the hateful the hateful response in upstate New York around asylum seekers that were being bussed upstate at the time, right? And the strategy was initially created to see, like, can we figure out a more welcoming construct in upstate New York, especially given that, upstate New York, as we all know, it's aging rapidly in terms of its population. It's decreasing in population, and we have these massive job shortages. And so what we ended up devising was a number of convenings across the state, focused in upstate New York, from Buffalo to Rochester to Syracuse, where Muhammad is, and Albany and the lower Hudson Valley and mid Hudson Valley. And the idea was, like, we didn't want to recreate the incredible work that the New York Immigration Coalition or Make the Road or the Columbia County Sanctuary Movement folks are doing. We really wanted to create a platform for business, labor, faith, and service providers to come together to have this discussion about, well, do we, this response that we saw in many counties upstate where people were just passing emergency orders to say no one can come here, and that didn't seem like a very smart strategy. So we decided to host those conversations. And what came out of those conversations, I think for this crew, it wasn't really groundbreaking. It's like, okay, well, like, how do we actually figure out like a better, thoughtful, welcoming integration strategy given the job shortages? And then also, how do we figure it out in a way like, I'm clearly come from a very predominantly white community. And I think that, when Dr. Refke opened up this conversation today, I think that there's this like long-term sentiment from the communities that I'm from, like, oh, immigrants, they're just going to be our dairy farm workers and caregivers, right? And so I think that there's this like, cultural mismatch. So that everybody's, alluded to so often that happens in rural and exurban communities where, folks want to push back on some of the anti-immigrant sentiment, but also need to better understand that like the job market, that the way that we want to create it isn't just to create pipelines for exploitive labor either, right? So we wanted to really have these clear conversations. And, some of the findings from those convenings were very straightforward that we've all seen, right? There was a mismatch in terms of, folks' credentials from their home country to the jobs that that are needed to be filled. There's, cultural and language barriers. There's barriers around, local transportation and affordable housing issues. And there was also moments where the business partners in those meetings said, hey, I know that I remember someone from the Syracuse convening actually talking about, oh, I know one of those workers has their legal authorization, but how do I figure out the sponsorship process for them to work? And we're like, well, no, they actually work. We just have to, figure out like a business navigator program, sort of similar to like the ACA healthcare navigator program. Like, how do we actually like translate those things? I would say, and I'll get into this more when we go in the back and forth questions. I think the thing that really occurs to me the most in our work, and Mohammed really referred to this well, is what's the backdrop in terms of the community response around welcoming immigrants and figuring out job strategies. So I really reflect quite often about the experience we had with the Mirror Lake Inn up in Lake Placid, right? So, here's the North Country, aging population, predominantly white, not the most diverse community, but they were starving for, a workforce to really help run the Mirror Lake Inn, and not just jobs that are like, oh, let's have folks come up and be room cleaners. It's like, we have HR positions to be filled. We have, accounting positions to be filled. So what they figured out was like, how do we actually like welcome in, like they brought in, I think 14 folks that were from Venezuela with TPS to really work at the Mirror Lake Inn. And what they figured out was, items like not only the standard things that folks need to be successful in jobs, like here's some workforce housing, here's some English language, ESL classes, here's how we can actually help their families, like make sure that their kids are being enrolled in school. So yes, there's that very, what I would say almost like basic necessities to have families feel successful. But what I'm going to put in the chat right now, and I don't know, I hope there's not like a paywall for this, but I think the other thing that we really thought about in terms of the Mirror Lake Inn is we worked with the owners to really focus on a very public message around what this means to welcome and bring folks in, right? So it's not like, oh, come and work at the Mirror Lake Inn, and by the way, be in the shadows and clean the rooms and figure out our accounting, but we're not really going to talk publicly that we're employing folks, right? So I think when I think about today's conversation and what we've learned at the Ellis Island Initiative is, how do we really make sure, especially given the peculiar economic strategy and harmful immigration strategies of this administration, how do we really make sure that we're creating like a backdrop for families, that they see others standing up for them, right? Like a lot of those Venezuelan workers in at the Mirror Lake Inn right now, and we've been having ongoing conversations with the Mirror Lake Inn, is they're not being very public about who they are and where they live right now, because then there's just a target on their back. So it's like, how do we make sure that working through those other broader issues to keep like what I would consider the hate at bay, that folks can really feel not only comfortable in their positions, see some type of employment that could gain their families the ability to, put food on the table, have a roof over the heads, but how do we also make sure that, there isn't this resounding, like hateful kickback that we saw when we originally witnessed, asylum seekers being sent upstate. So, thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Borden. Yes, so I know the time given for the panelists are not enough to cover all your important and valuable works. So now David and I are going to alternate and ask questions to each of our panelists. David, would you like to start with Ms. Alman and Apartheid Global?
All right. Thank you, JT. And thank you, Mohammed. Thank you so much, Kevin, for those interesting and amazing insights. I'm really learning a lot, and I think this is very impactful for for the people that are following online, and for those that will hear this podcast afterwards. But Stephanie, I'd just like to engage you a bit more in terms of your expertise and your thinking around Upwardly Global's AI report. And Stephanie, maybe I could start with asking you specifically about how does the use of AI chatbots like ChatGPT, for example, how does this impact new English-speaking professionals?
AI chatbots, bots like ChatGPT, have so much opportunity to support and provide great tools for people who are new English speakers or non-native English speakers. But then there's also, as I shared, the other angle of it as well, which is where we need to be keeping our eyes open to ensure that what we are getting out of AI is actually fully to our benefit. So as far as thinking about the language-specific elements of this and the needs that folks who are new to the US or new English speakers may need, tools like ChatGPT are a great tool for bettering communication. So you can prompt it to refine your message or to fix the grammar of a message, or ask to frame a message in a certain way. Please make these points into an email for a recruiter in a tone that is XYZ, professional and friendly. So there are ways that these tools can be incredibly helpful to help individuals to just have an easier time in managing some of the real specifics of the US job search. And that can go beyond job search as well. Where where the risk is in the full trust of AI tools without then reading through, double checking, always positioning yourself as smarter than the tool. So while the tool's there to help, I then still need to double check its work. Everything has to be screened. Everything has to be reviewed. I have seen a lot of communication come through my way via inbox or proposal or whatever it might be. And I can tell when a human has not taken a second look at what has come from ChatGPT. Recruiters will also know if an email has been generated and it's just come straight from ChatGPT, and that will not look good for a recruiter. Or to a recruiter. So we have to be really diligent and make sure that we are positioning ourselves as smarter than the tool. The tool is there to help us, and we've got to double check it, and we have to make sure that it aligns in with the message that we're trying to convey. Where there's additional risk is where we don't really know. We're not smarter than the tool. So maybe this is something that I'm seeing with many of the job seekers at Upwardly Global, for example, is if ChatGPT is saying that this is the US style way to do something, then maybe I should trust it because I'm still learning that US style and that US approach to this communication. So that's also where there's risk. Knowing where we have our knowledge gaps is important because that will allow for us to make sure that maybe we have a couple of iterations of this where we ask a peer to look at it, or a career coach, like an Upwardly Global career coach, for example. Am I on track? Does this make sense? Are there cultural nuances that I am missing here? Again, humans being smarter. So using the tool as a tool, but not as the ultimate in any form. I also think it can be helpful, again, in prompting. So asking ChatGPT questions that are not the decision. So it's not to ask, what decision should I make? It is, what are the options for, and how can I navigate this? Or what are the considerations I need here? So what are the questions that we're prompting that can just bring us information that help us to be a little bit smarter so that we can make good decisions. But again, always putting ourselves in the position as being smarter than the tool and knowing where we're not.
Great, thank you so much. And I also don't want to forget, we have some questions on the chat. This one is to you, Stephanie. In an attempt to make sure the data going in the system is effectively informing what comes out, it seems that a human element is needed to translate the multiple experiences to a portfolio of skills that can be fed into the system. Is what you think is missing is the missing is what you think is the missing link, or what do you think is the missing link, and the way to overcome that lack of understanding of edge cases?
So this is a really interesting question. I'll say it's a little complex, probably beyond my skill set, but I'm going to try and answer it as best as I can. So what I'll say,
it's from Dr. Refke, so it's not me. It's blame it on Dr. Refke. It's not her. It's not my fault. It's not my question.
Either way, it's a great question, and it's something for us to be thinking about and talking about. So I do appreciate it. So what I'll say is there are two ways to look at it. One is, let's use ChatGPT as an example. Large scale data. I'm pretty sure ChatGPT has already scraped all of the possible data off of the internet that it can scrape. I don't know that putting more information to it is what the right conversation is. So maybe the right conversation there is how are humans are designing the tool, how are humans ultimately directing the tool to develop its outputs. So again, looking at that bell curve, which is something that was discussed in, again, our AI for Impact report that I encourage you to take a look at. The bell curve, the ChatGPT is designed to rest right in the middle. All the information pulled to the middle. So are there ways that we can help for tools like this to be more considerate of all of the nuance that there is? Maybe if not even able to answer with the nuance, acknowledging where nuance might be missing. How can we help people to use the tool better? For those that are making new tools, using machine learning on their own, we know that we have to have really good data going in order for good data to come out. And so for anyone who's building new tools, we want to be thinking about this. What is the data that we're putting in? Machine learning requires a really high amount of information in order for it to actually effectively keep learning on its own as it's designed to do. It's a tough task. It's far outside of my scope of expertise, but it does come down to being really mindful of the design of both the information going in and what is determined of what's coming out. Everything is designed. So that means that humans do have the power to design what the shape of information looks like as it's coming out and what those considerations are and what that weighting is of information. Some things are weighted really high, some things are weighted really low. What is it that's driving certain information to be surfaced? It's human design. And so how can we be better informing that? There may be a technology expert, a machine learning software developer on this call that wants to correct me, and I welcome that. But that's from my scope of understanding how I would try to answer that question.
Excellent. And secondly, how does the use of AI tools to screen resumes impact chances of job placement? And can you share a few specific examples?
So AI is not entirely new. I think that the way that we are using it today is revolutionary, makes it feel super new. For a long time, we have been using tools that are kind of smart and technology that has helped us pull out information, disaggregate information, surface information, and all of that is just smart technology, again, by human design. What has happened long before this talk on AI is that people were being screened out. They were overlooked. So resumes go in, they are overlooked. What causes that to happen? The lack of ability for a tool to translate past experience, international education, titles in other countries for a job may be different from a comparable job title to that same role here in the US. So that all creates opportunity for people to not be surfaced for jobs that they are fully qualified for. And that's a huge miss. And so that can really impact someone's chances of job placement. But that's, again, where tools like HiredScore, which I shared as an example, and also having just trained recruiters to be looking at bias and acknowledging bias and making sure that we're working against the bias is always important. But again, also bias isn't new. Before technology, there was impact to people not getting placed in jobs because of human bias. Now that has translated into technology bias. So it all comes from that same root. And it really just requires the attention for us and the acknowledgement for us to actually change the direction of that.
Okay, and I see Dr. Refke has her hand up.
Thank you, David, and thank you, Dr. Alman. Before we move on from AI, I just wanted to clarify what I meant with this question about skills. So it seems that instead of feeding the machine or the AI app the entire resume, wouldn't it be much more productive if the applicant or the administrator translate those resumes into a portfolio of skills and feed it to the machine? Because these are marketable skills, and it seems that this will address the multiple experiences people come with from overseas, being a doctor, a statistician, or and they have really those diverse experiences and diverse skills. If you feed the machine the skills portfolio instead of resume, is it better able to read it and translate it into possible pathways, career pathways?
Answer is yes. And we can either do that by human effort, or we can have the technology tools do a better job of doing that. And that's, for example, what HiredScore is doing. So HiredScore is taking past experience and really using skills-based matching to the jobs as opposed to title matching, which is part of what the flop was with the other tool that we had used in career navigation. They were using titles to match. Huge miss. But how do we take past experience, extract the skills from what that past experience is, and then also look at the job descriptions, extract the skills that are needed to be successful in that job, and match those together. So I think that's it, Dr. Refke. That's exactly what we want to happen. And we have to make sure that the tools that we're using do that, or that we are co-designing with these products so that they're moving in that direction of doing that. Because otherwise, yes, they're just the folks that have the skills are being overlooked.
All right, thank you, Stephanie, for that. And Dr. Refke, thank you for that elaboration in terms of your question. The next one for you, Stephanie, is why do AI career navigation tools do so much misidentifying of education and work experience credentials from immigrant and refugee applicants? And do employers know about this?
So I'll start by saying I see that the career navigation tools, or at least the way that I'm discussing them, are really a job seeker tool. So I, as a job seeker, which path do I want to go on? That being a career navigation tool versus what are maybe recruiting and hiring tools. So as far as the issues with the employer tools, I think that a bigger question is not just do they know about this, but do they care? Do employers care about the potential for the bias and the potential for the weeding out of people despite them having skills, the right skills? Bias, again, isn't new. This has been an issue, whether it was a human reading a resume, now it's an issue with technology reading the resume. The employers have to care, and not just care with their words, but care with action. So what are we doing to make sure that we're mitigating this bias? And so I think that, yes, employers know about it only because bias isn't new. And so the bias is still there, and it's always going to be there. We'll have to just continue to make sure that we are always learning. And because now we're leaning on technology so much more, we need to make sure our technology is also always learning and reduce that misidentification and that weeding out of people with great skill sets as best as we can.
Okay, great. And how have employers responded to UG's recommendations to combat brain waste caused by the adoption of AI to screen resumes?
We have a great employer network. I'm so grateful to have this. Really incredibly large companies, many small companies. And so there are many people, many companies that are deeply invested in drawing more of a connection between the problem that they're experiencing in their companies of labor shortages or not really finding the right talent, or the amount of effort and time that goes into finding the right talent. We know what recruiting costs are, versus up against what the opportunity is with this incredible talent that's in the community that just isn't being surfaced. And so we know that there are so many companies out there that are committed to bridging that gap in smart ways. And we've been continuing to work with them to both train their teams and also to get their teams onto our platforms. So we have a few different tools that we offer to employers that help to surface our job seekers that are in our network. And also just really, again, reposition the idea of these individuals being, on the outskirts of what the standard is that these tools are capturing, and bring them more to the center and put more of a light on their skills particularly. So for those that are part of our network, we see deep commitment. Of course, deep commitment also there's always a long tail of change and infrastructure and perception change, which is often sometimes the hardest part, to make sure that is fully realized, across all of the teams, and not just the recruiting teams, but also the hiring managers, which, in a large company, a lot of employees. So there's a lot of work that's there, but we're glad to see so many companies that are really invested in it, especially in what is now a changing landscape of conversation around DEI, continuing to see that companies are still in need of talent and therefore are still looking for good talent, whether they are internationally trained and have international experience or from the US. So we're here to support those employers that are committed to solving those needs.
All right, thank you so much, Stephanie. Last question for you is, what can state and local governments do to encourage employers to approach technology investments as partnerships that involve co-design and commitment to common outcomes rather than simple vendor-buyer relationships?
This is a complicated one, but I'll try to give it an easy answer. I know that nothing is as simple, especially in working with government agencies, as we could dream it to be. But I'll say that I want to see our government agencies invest more in the present and more in the future. We're often on the back foot. That is what we see, and that's what we hear from our partners as well. And we have many wonderful partners across government agencies, but government is often operating on the back foot. Innovation is the key to success, and so if we can get government agencies to really be pushing forward more and be thinking about innovation, that will be then what drives all of that magic. That'll be what brings the private sector in to want to be a part of this. Because if the product is good and if the solution is good, then people will use it and companies will use it. And so how do we help government agencies to move more in that direction towards innovation? I know that there's so many barriers and so many constraints and so many reasons why things are as they are today. But if we can dream up a scenario, it is that government is on the front foot, moving towards innovation. We have great products, great solutions that ultimately further this shared mission that we all have here on this call, and that then the private sector want to be a part of because it works. And so I'd love to see government agencies really do more on the investing and leading front. And then as they do that, pay close attention to our AI for Impact report and the things to consider as we're investing in technology so that we all don't continue to repeat mistakes from the learnings that we have at Upwardly Global, as far as how we can best use technology to continue to drive the work that we want forward. Starting with the problem, understanding AI limitations, just being really smart about the way that we're using it.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. Really appreciate your insight and comments on those questions. So for the next section, I'm going to hand over to my co-moderator, JT, who asked Mohammed Lam a set of questions, and then I will follow that up with some questions for Kevin Borden. So over to you, JT.
Thank you, David, and thank you, Ms. Alman, for your interesting Q&A. We'd like to continue this engaging conversations with the rest of our panelists. I'd like to begin with you, Mr. Kim. We've already talked about several barriers that foreign-born workers face when, we try to channel their skills and talents to appropriate career pathways. So, from your experience as an ONA job coach and community organizer, what are the most common barriers that foreign-born workers face when trying to integrate into local workplaces, and how can employers address these effectively? Mr. Kim?
Yeah, I think this is a very good question, in a sense that we have a lot of foreign-born educated who have highly skilled professional degree, and they are always trying to look for opportunities. And as you know, being new to a new country is something that is pretty much not easy to navigate. Number one, you have to situate yourself in the new environment you are living in. Number two, you have to know exactly the right resources, how to get the right resources. And number three, you have to identify the community you can be able to even see yourself. So that being said, foreign-born educated, they are pretty much facing a lot of barriers when it comes to employment. Number one can be a lack of transportation mechanism that will allow them to move from one place to another. That's a key factor of many issues that foreign-born educated are facing. And number two, we always talk about language barrier, but I will not say language barrier. I will say the language is a skill, so it's not a barrier. And in most cases, I feel like that's something that always people who are hiring use to be able to prevent people from being hired or even gives them the opportunity that they deserve. I feel like sometimes we have to look at the best models, and the best models comes through. If you look at, for example, what is happening at Boston, or if you look at what is happening at St. Louis, Missouri, so pretty much they understand that they cannot really do the work. Companies or businesses cannot really succeed without a full integration of immigrants and refugees, because these people they constitute the large share of our global economy. And if you look, for example, specifically here in Syracuse, I remember when I was working as a job coach at NFS Work, there's a company called IMS. It is called an immediate mailing services that we used to partner. So the person who was working as a hire manager, so pretty much she was collaborating with us in a sense that for her, what she wanted to do is how she can be able to increase the return that they have at IMS. And that being said, pretty much she was working with us to see how they can be culturally responsive, in a sense that sometimes like people who come here, they have different kind of skills, they have different kind of culture. So the employer has to be able to embrace those culture as well too. So it can be, for example, employers being willing to even like use ChatGPT or even have a cell aid on their phone to be able to translate what the language of the employee that they are working with. And at the same time, sometimes working away from what we say a belief in ethnic superiority that makes our identity irreconcilable with modernity. And I feel like there's a hyper European centric nationalism here in the United States. You will never hear people saying European American. They always say immigrants, African Americans, Native Americans, Indian Americans. So in most cases, we have to understand that these are the people who would like to contribute to our workforce. And in order for us to be more competitive, and especially right now where we are, where the economy is growing and employees are facing a lot of hard time in finding the right skills, we have to make sure that we can be able to be considerable of immigrants and refugees, and at the same time understand that they have so many perspectives that they always bring. And also research has shown that how diverse your workforce is pretty much will determine how competitive you are going to be in the global market. So something to keep always like in mind when it comes to employers as well too.
Thank you, Mr. Tim. As you said, it seems like it's really important to work with the employers, especially corporate partners, in helping them understand their employees' cultural differences. And so, yes, as someone who's worked closely with both corporate partners and also the immigrant communities, what have you found to be some of the successful strategies to build inclusive hiring practices that truly benefit foreign-born employees?
Yes, I think that's also another good question. I feel like now a lot of corporate businesses they come to the point to realize that because of the challenges that they are facing, so there is no other option rather than working with community-based organization. Because in most cases, some of the wraparound services are provided by community-based organization. And then now corporate businesses, they are looking for ways to not only create partnership with a community-based organization, but at the same time, how they can be able to learn from people who are diverse enough, who are cultured enough, and so they can be able to improve their hiring practices. And we see that happening here in upstate New York, pretty much where you have a microcosm of diversity. We have so many immigrants population over here. And also we have the New York State Office for New Americans who that are also doing incredible work in making sure that as we move forward, immigrants and New Americans are integrated effectively in our workforce. So overall, it is more about creating an inclusive workforce strategy geared toward collaborating with community organizations who are providing this kind of cultural competency that employers need, but at the same time, being able to help them with some of their unconscious biases, because sometimes people can deny someone opportunity because they cannot be able to relate that person. So partnering with a community-based organization, not only can you be effective in not only getting the talents that you need, but in the meantime, it can tell a lot about your company as well. I feel like Stephanie has said something very fundamental when she said it is the information it is the information in that informs the information out. So people or companies are always competing based on how diverse their workforce are. And in most cases, research has always shown that companies who have a different pool of workforce, they are more competitive and people are more dynamic, people are more energized, people always bring perspective, and businesses are always benefiting from that too.
Oh, excuse me. Since we're short on time, let's move on to the next question. So again, you mentioned how important it is for the community organizers to help the employees, you know, to get their credentials recognized and find appropriate career paths.
Mhm.
So, what role do local leaders and community organizations play in fostering trust and inclusion between employers and foreign-born workers, especially given how, as Mr. Borden previously addressed, we have this narrative hijacked by the anti-immigrant factions.
Mhm.
And yeah, so what's your opinion on that, and how can this collaboration be strengthened to
Yeah,
overcome this barrier or challenge?
yeah, I think as a community, we have to think about ways to develop a cohesive approach, because sometimes we always talk about, in terms of government, we always talk about us versus them, or us foreign-born individual versus Native Americans, or sometimes institution versus foreign-born individuals. And I feel like sometimes the goal that local leaders has to play is more about working in collaborative effort with community organization, resettlement agencies, literacy providers to be able to inform policies. And we also have to make sure that those policies put forward reflecting the interest of our community as a whole. So, and at the same time, we can be able to have also a dialogue, in a sense that the native-born individuals, they have to understand that to be able to build a cohesive community, we have to be able to shun away from, okay, these people, they are outsiders or versus insiders. So we have to make sure also we are working together as a community, and then seeing others as human beings and as deserving of living in the community, and then being integrated. And in most cases, I feel like that's the essence, because even here in Syracuse, when you see, for example, we have a lot of immigrants population. We have a lot of refugee population, but even the native population right here, pretty much they are collaborating with foreign-born educated, because they know exactly this is the value of community, because it's not only one size fit all. And then if you look at what is happening, the United States, pretty much the irony is it has been founded by immigrants. So this nation is strong because the diverse perspective, the melting pot that they created. And I feel like sometimes if you look at history, sometimes we can be able to see the change that we want to see, but at the same time, making sure along the process too, we are working collaboratively with our local leaders to inform policy, because we have to understand that we're going to have an inclusive workforce. Inclusion will allow everyone to be able to not only find a job, but being able to have a sense of belonging within the community that you live.
Thank you. And so, more than just emphasizing the importance of diversity and inclusion, I think it's really important to communicate that these foreign-born workers bring talents and skills that contribute to the economy of the community and the state more broadly. So, the last question for you, Mr. Tiam, is what advice would you give to companies that really want to move beyond diversity statements and take more meaningful action to support the economic mobility of foreign-born workers?
Yes, I think the advice is simple. It is more about working away from slanders, working away from misconceptions, working away from stereotypes, and understanding that people who come to this country, like I said earlier, they embrace this nation creed. They know the value of hard work. They know the values of compassion. They would like to contribute to our local economy, and they would like to contribute to any kind of company. So businesses, for sure, they have a lot of work that they have to do, in not only handling their unconscious biases, but at the same time making sure they are also getting out of their comfort zone to be able to learn from other people about other places and different culture, so they can be able to have an effective, inclusive hiring practices. And I feel like if they do that, pretty much that can lead a long way, because, like I said, businesses are always competitive based on what kind of diverse pool that you have, and people who have different kind of perspective are more likely to make effective decision as well too. So something to think about for local businesses too.
Thank you, Mr. Tiam. I think that was a very strong and powerful answer. And I would just like to remind our floor that you can ask the follow-up questions on our Q&A tab. And now I'd like to hand over to David for further Q&A with Mr. Borden.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much. JT for that section, and Mohammed Tiam, thank you so much for your excellent comments. And the next set of questions, are to Kevin Borden. Thank you so much for your earlier intro, Kevin, and for all the work that you're doing, and also for the SLO ventures that you set up in terms of consulting and supporting some of the work that a lot of us on this panel are working on. The first question to you, Kevin, comes here from our chat, and it speaks to what experience did you have when trying to work with employers to have them step up and lead on keeping the hate at bay? And what exactly excuse me. Yes, and keeping the head at bay. And what exactly is the strategy, and how do you activate employer leadership? Are you having success? And if so, what are these successes? Give us maybe one enlightening experience.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I guess, it's an ongoing journey, right? So the anti-immigrant forces, the diversity forces are strong and emboldened and have been for centuries, right? And I think, when I think about the reflection of the work that we've been doing with the Mirror Lake Inn, what then, I think it's really, are there some bright spots in terms of employers that think the way that the Mirror Lake Inn is now operating, and how does that spread, right? So, for instance, 3 weeks ago, the Adirondack Regional Immigration Collaborative held a gathering in Glens Falls, and the Mirror Lake Inn was there, but then there was also additional employers on a panel. One was a janitorial services company, another was Six Flags, right? And they really, I think in a way, because of some of the guiding light that happened from the Mirror Lake Inn, it created like an acceptable pathway for other employers who want to be good partners and want to figure out, some of the pathways that, I think Mohammed reflected on in his answers. Like, how do we actually make sure that there's places like the Mirror Lake Inn that aren't siloed unto themselves, right? So I think that's one of the, in terms of like my own experience and expertise, I'm not very versed in the intricate, like, here are the workforce development programs. These are the waivers from the, 1115 Medicaid waivers for folks to get, credentialed in the healthcare industry. It's more, I think, in my mind, creating that public dialogue, which reframes the narrative on how we actually build strong local economies and communities. That we don't think of those things as separate on entities unto themselves, as I think, Muhammad really also reflected on in terms of Syracuse. And Syracuse is a great example, right? I think there's a lot of upstate cities that don't have the long-term, history of refugee resettlement that Syracuse has. And there's some communities, for instance, like Watkins Glen, that are, there's this collaborative happening between the Watkins Glen Chamber and the Community Foundation there, and ARC, which is I don't know if folks are familiar with ARC, but it's like caregiving for folks, and especially adults with developmental disabilities. Like, they're starving for workers, and they're figuring out like a pathway for new immigrants to help rebuild that business, actually. So I think, it's trying to figure out how do we spread some of these like really incredible lessons that have happened in communities like Syracuse, like Buffalo, who have a very intricate history in terms of integration. And not to say that there aren't challenges there, as Muhammad knows full well, but I think that like the way that, like, we want to spread that as opposed to seeing the spread of the cancer that we've seen around the anti-immigration and, bad economic policy.
Excellent. Thank you so much. What are the primary barriers that local employers face when integrating foreign-born workers, and what institutional arrangements have proven most effective in supporting their success?
Yeah. I think one of the barriers I want to just reflect on, because someone had put in the chat this, like, what is this idea about employers like think that they need to sponsor humanitarian parolees, etc. I think, like, to be frank and not to oversimplify it, one of the key barriers that we're really struggling with is the lack of comprehensive immigration reform to really make sure that folks can become permanent citizens in our country, right? So I think what we're seeing in terms of some of the barriers is just this, like, for lack of a better term, this mishigash of all these like different carve-out programs like J1, H1B, 2B visas. And it's like this alphabet soup of how we've tried to attack like this worker shortage and needs of employers with these, like, in some ways, kind of bizarre carve-outs in terms of allowing people to gain access to employment. So I really want to, I know that comprehensive immigration reform, it's probably a ways off given the current like administration, but I think like we've created this issue for ourselves as a country by not really justly and humanely approaching like that pathway to fair immigration, like a fair pathway for families to become permanent parts of our society, right? So I really want to, again, I'm not trying to oversimplify it, but I do think I also wanted to really reflect on that question that was posed in the chat also.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you also for capturing that. Could you share what you think are the best practices or innovative models for enhancing human resource capacity in the workplace through English language learning and bilingualism in the workplace?
Yeah. I mean, to answer that quickly, because I know we're at time, I think, for, again, at the Mirror Lake Inn, they embedded that program within their employee onboarding process, right? So that it wasn't, and it was also done in a way like they're also thinking for their other employees, not like to, again, Mohammed, I don't mean to be picking on you, but to think about the points that you raised, it's like it's not just about like making sure that those employees have the language skills that are necessary for the work, but the Mirror Lake Inn is also in return doing work with their for lack of a better term, native born workers to understand what the immigration policies look like right now from the administration and why it's important for them to be a part of protecting their own co-workers within their place of employment. And, even when it comes to like, if there is like an ICE raid at that place, like how to like for instance, label some doorways as private where they can't go into, and making sure that those employees, the other employees that are, again, for lack of a better term, native to that area, like are also supporting the programs that they see their coworkers that they see their coworkers need to be successful also. So I think it feels like the language immersion and skill-based work can't also be narrowly defined to only you know providing the conversational skills for English as second language speakers to be successful in the workplace. I think there needs to be that like mirroring effect for folks who already have those skills.
All right, last question. How can community-based ventures help to reframe immigrant inclusion, not only as a social goal, but also as a driver of local innovation and economic vitality?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think this is the question I struggled the most with. And to Stephanie's point, sometimes I think I'm just going to make something up sometimes in terms of like I don't know if I'm the expert at answering that question. Um, I I guess I would, I would really think about it's a broader question on whether we want to go backwards into a more feudalistic economic system where we're taking advantage of workers, we're separating workers based on their, diversity, based on their language skills, and I think in terms of innovation, it's more just understanding that that we have a broad-based understanding that our economies are strongest and our communities are the healthiest when we have inclusive and diverse hiring practices, when we're figuring out ways to make sure that there's a public message out there, like what has happened up in the Adirondacks, where employers are saying, no, folks are welcome here and we need to figure this out together. So, again, I don't want to oversimplify my answer per se, mostly just because I'm not a workforce development expert in any stretch of the imagination, more of a public messaging and how do we really create loving, welcoming communities where all families can thrive.
Thank you so much, Kevin. Thank you so much, Mohammed, and thank you so much, Stephanie. And at this point, I'll hand over to Dr. Refke, who will take some questions from the audience and issue some closing remarks. So, Dr. Refke, over to you.
Thank you, David. Thank you, JT, for moderating. Thank you to our esteemed panelists. We are experiencing in this country a demographic cliff. The answer to the loss of population and the shortage in the workplace, the answer to maintaining global competitiveness is to make sure that we draw on the pool of immigrants and all the pool of talent that exists. Also to make sure that these organizations are inclusive and welcoming so that you are able to retain them once you recruited them. Employers need to lead in this effort. They need to light the spark. We rely on them. We look at their leadership. And obviously, all the organizations that are presented here with our esteemed panelists are intermediaries or trying to facilitate that. And that work is so important. Employers really need to lead and to communicate the message and the narrative that we need a welcoming community to be able to retain this talent and this workforce. And as our panelists said, we need to have these strong collaborations and strong partnerships with CBOs. Technology is just a tool. It is not always the answer to everything. It is the means to the answer. And we really need to co-design, as Stephanie alluded, to engage key stakeholders so that we understand the problem and we make solutions, we generate solutions that are appropriate and they're not really amplify and exacerbate the exclusions. And so and as Muhammad said, we really need to walk away from the misconceptions and the stereotypes and and employers need to be, as Kevin said, light the spark and to be the guiding light for us and to lead in this perspective, in this arena. Thank you all so very much. We apologize for going over time, but we hope everybody has a wonderful rest of the day and rest of the week. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.